Chapter 24.
His eyes snapped open, and he stared into the darkness. The rain had stopped pattering against the sides of the house, leaving only the sound of the heater.
Alan.
A voice whispered from the side of the bed. Alan shivered beneath the warm blankets. He knew if he looked toward the voice, he'd see nothing.
Alan.
The voice whispered again. He scrunched his eyes together and listened to the mad drumbeat of his heart in his ears.
There is no closet man,
the voice whispered. It chuckled in the darkness.
but there is an ice cream man.
His eyes snapped open, and he turned his head to the left side of the bed. Two gleaming yellow eyes glowed in the darkness. Alan threw the covers off the bed and flung himself toward the nightstand. Unable to breathe, he snapped on the lamp. The darkness was obliterated in an instant, leaving him staring at an empty room.
I'm under the bed,
The thing whispered. No, you're not, Alan whispered back, his words broken by rapid breaths. You are not here, he whispered. Fighting back the urge to run screaming from the room, he dropped to all fours, his eyes scanning beneath the bed. Nothing was there. You're not real, Alan said, and stood. Shivering from fear, Alan rolled the blankets up, dragging them toward the door. You're not real, he whispered to the room, closing the door behind him.
Chapter 25.
It was still dark in her bedroom when she opened her eyes. Her alarm hadn't gone off yet, but here she was, trying to crawl through sleep's hangover. Her hand reached for Trey, but found only sheets and his pillow. Not this morning, she said to herself, and managed to choke back the sob. Morning. Time to get up. Time to get Alan some breakfast and get him to school. Then she'd have to call about Trey. She threw back the covers and stared at the ceiling. Cold air tinkled across her bare legs and chest. She shivered. Hot shower. Yes, a hot shower was exactly the thing. Carolyn put her feet on the floor, slid out of bed, and started for the bathroom. A shape in the floor stopped her from putting her foot down. Carolyn froze, unable to even exhale. Covers? Blankets? The bundle twitched and rolled. Carolyn held back a scream. She stepped over the cloth-covered blob and into the bathroom. She flipped on the lights and turned, ready to face whatever it was. A small hand rested on the floor, stretched outward from a Spider-Man blanket. Carolyn finally managed to exhale, her heart beating so fast she thought it would explode. She stepped forward toward Alan and then realized she was naked. Feeling embarrassed, she grabbed her robe from beside the bed and cinched it around herself. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to calm down. Why the hell had that scared her? Just a bundle of blankets, damn it, with her sleeping son beneath it all. Once she felt her heart rate had slowed down to an acceptable rhythm, she walked to Alan and knelt. She peeled back the blanket and stared into Alan's sleeping face. The boy didn't look peaceful. Instead, his teeth were locked together in a death grip, his eyes scrunched tight. Alan? She whispered. The boy didn't move. Knowing it was going to hurt, she slipped her arms beneath him and lifted. She grunted with the effort and ignored the pain in her lower back as she placed him on the bed. Alan? She asked again. The boy said nothing. With a sigh, she straightened him on the bed, practically dragging his head toward Trey's pillow. She covered him in blankets and turned back to the bathroom. Want Daddy to protect me from the ice cream man, Alan mumbled from behind her. She spun on her heel and stared at the bed. Alan rolled over onto his side, his breathing deep and level. Her heart rate had risen again, hammering in her chest. Alan? She asked. The boy said nothing. She closed the bathroom door with care, ensuring it wouldn't bang and wake him up. He had at least another hour of sleep before she needed to push him out of bed. The ice cream man. Fuck, she whispered. Was Alan already starting to see the same things Trey did? Was he going to end up at an institution talking to people who weren't there? She shivered. Just sleep talk, she whispered to herself. She pulled off the robe and walked into the shower, trying to take deep, even breaths.
Chapter 26.
She'd awakened Alan from her bed by stroking his cheek and saying his name. The boy's eyes fluttered open, and he stared into her face, a look of surprise that transformed into a thin smile. "Good morning, Mommy," he said. "Good morning, baby," she said back to him, her hand still brushing his cheek. "Do you know where you are?" "In your room," he said and blushed. "Yes, you are," she giggled. "Do you remember why?" Alan yawned and put his small hands over his face. "No," he said through his fingers, the word muddled and muffled. She nodded and tousled his hair. "It's time for you to get dressed and ready for school." He dropped his hands from his face. "Okay, Mommy." Carolyn stood up from the bed to leave, just as his hand reached and grabbed the hem of her robe. "Mommy?" he asked. She turned back to him with a sigh. "Yes, Alan?" "Will Daddy come back to keep us safe?" Her brow furrowed. "Keep us safe? From what?" Alan frowned. I don't know." "Get dressed, kiddo. Have to get some breakfast into you." Alan smiled and slid off the bed. She watched him leave the room and then closed the bedroom door. As she turned, her smile faded. "Will Daddy keep us safe?" Alan had asked. She shivered. While she dressed, she thought of all the things she had to do. First, call work and tell them she wouldn't be in today. Second, get Alan to school. Third, it was the third one that made her worry. She had to call Kincaid and find out Trey's condition and whether or not she could see him. But even if Kincaid said no, she was going to be there, damn it. Not like last time. Carolyn picked out a clean pair of jeans and a sweatshirt. No makeup today. Well, maybe a little. She slipped on the jeans, a practical bra, and then the sweatshirt. With a sigh, she stared at herself in the mirror. A worry line was forming and her eyes had dark circles. 4 hours of sleep. Fuck. She wondered how much sleep Trey had managed. Would he still be in the hospital bed, his skull wrapped in bandages? She took in a sharp breath and then let it out slowly. "I'll see you, Trey," she whispered. "I promise." Carolyn braided her long hair, tying the end with expert fingers. She stared at herself in the mirror. She looked like shit, but she thought Trey wouldn't care, and on a morning like this, she didn't give a shit who saw her. She flipped out the light and headed downstairs. Alan was already at the breakfast table, munching on cereal. She walked up behind him and squeezed his shoulder. He turned around to her, his teeth still crunching. "Are you going to see Daddy today?" "Don't talk with your mouth full, son," she said with a smile. "Yes," she said, heading to the coffee maker. "I'll see him while you're at school." Alan clinked his spoon against the glass bowl. "Can I see him tonight?" She paused and then clicked the coffee maker button. "I don't know if you can see him tonight, baby. But I know, Alan," she said, turning toward him. "I'll ask." Alan nodded, his smile creeping back. "You'll tell Daddy I love him?" "Of course." She turned back to the coffee maker and then stopped. "Alan?" He looked up at her as he put another spoonful in his mouth. "Do you know what Daddy is supposed to protect us from?" He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it, continued crunching, and swallowed. "The ice cream man," Alan whispered. "Who?" she asked, her heart rate rising and thumping in her ears. "The ice cream man, Mommy. Daddy doesn't like him." Alan frowned. "I don't like him either." She stepped away from the coffee maker and sat down at the breakfast table. She thrummed her fingers on its glass surface. "You've never met the ice cream man." Alan shook his head. "I saw him when we picked up Daddy yesterday." Alan frowned. "I don't like him." The ice cream man. Carolyn barely remembered the guy. She had driven the car as fast as she dared through the winding main drag of the subdivision. When she reached the intersection of Pine and Crystal, the ice cream truck was parked at the side of the tree-lined road. A few people stood around the white Econoline van. She pulled into the side street and parked the car. "Alan, stay here," she whispered and opened the door. She ran toward the van. The man in the cream-colored overalls stood at least a head above everyone else. He stared down at the prone figure at his feet. His white pie hat swept forward so that it nearly covered his eyes. He looked up at her as she ran toward him. "Ma'am," the man said in a high-pitched voice, "are you the wife?" She knelt down before Trey without looking up at the man in the overalls. "Yes," she said. Trey lay on the concrete, eyes closed. "Trey?" she asked. His eyes fluttered. Blood trickled down his scalp from where his head had hit the ground. "Trey."
He ran at me,
the man said. Carolyn glanced upward. She had difficulty making out the man's face beneath the shadow of the pork pie hat. His long nose and pouty lips were all she could see, besides his fat jowls. The man's eyes were perfectly hidden.
He gave me quite a fright,
the ice cream man said in a monotone. She glanced back down at Trey. "How long has he been like this?"
About 10 minutes,
the man said in the same expressionless voice.
Lady, I have to go,
the man said again.
I'm a little out of sorts.
She looked up at him. The man rubbed his hands together, the friction against his palms sounding like sandpaper. "Yes, of course," she said softly. "I'll take him to the hospital. If you can help me get him back to the car."
Sorry, ma'am, the man said. Hurt my back years ago. Can't help you there.
He looked into the crowd of people.
Can one of you help this lady?
He asked in the same flat voice. "Yeah," a young man said. "Here." He stepped forward to Carolyn and grabbed one of Trey's arms. "I got him," he said. Carolyn looked up at the goateed teenager and smiled at him as best she could. "Thank you," she said. They lifted Trey by his arms, bringing him to his feet. Trey's eyelids fluttered again, enough for him to hold Carolyn's stare. His legs took some of the weight as they walked him to the car. Carolyn turned her head to thank the ice cream man, but he was already in his van. The word "Yum" was spelled in bright crimson letters on the back of the van. She felt a chill as it made its way up the street, a thin line of blue exhaust spitting out of the tailpipe. She stared at Alan across the breakfast table. "Did you see something, Alan?" Alan shrugged. "He hides his eyes," the boy said softly. "He doesn't look like somebody nice." With a nod, Carolyn forced a smile. "You're a smart kid." He'd smiled back at her. "Now hurry up and finish breakfast. We're going to be late." The drive to the hospital had been quiet and uneventful. She pulled into the parking lot and realized she couldn't remember the drive at all, only the thoughts in her head. Alan had kissed her goodbye as he left the car, making her once again promise to tell Daddy he loved him. The hospital sat before her, its lights visible in the darkness of the overcast day. The weather was finally supposed to break later that afternoon, but Carolyn could scarcely believe it. She pulled out her iPhone, unlocked it, and found Kincaid's number. With a tap, she brought the phone to her ear. It rang twice.
"This is Dr. Kincaid."
"Hi," Carolyn said. "This is Carolyn Leger.
"Carolyn!"
The doctor's voice answered. She could hear the smile in the woman's voice.
"I suppose you're calling about Trey."
She nodded and said, "Yes, I am."
"Trey's okay. He's been quiet this morning. His concussion isn't as bad as we thought. I haven't really had a chance to assess his state this morning, but the nurses say he's doing okay."
"I'm here at the hospital," she said. "I was hoping I could see him." There was a pause.
"Okay. I'll call the nurse station in a minute and let them know."
Carolyn frowned. "You sounded a little hesitant there. Is there a problem?"
Not really.
Kincaid said.
I just want you to be prepared. I know what kind of hallucinations he's had. I assume he told you as well?
"Yes."
Okay, then I want you to be prepared that he may see those again. I'm just not sure what kicked them off. So do me a favor.
Kincaid said, taking a deep breath.
Let's try not to get him excited for the moment, okay?
Okay, Carolyn agreed.
Keep the visit pretty short, please. I'm going to come in later this morning and talk to him.
Carolyn felt a sob trying to break its way past her throat. She managed to choke it back. When she spoke again, her voice quivered. Okay, she sniffed.
Carolyn, it's going to be okay. He's been resilient in the past, and you and Alan have a lot to do with that.
I abandoned him last time, Carolyn said, finally unable to hide the tears in her voice. Kincaid sighed on the other end of the line.
No, Carolyn, you didn't. If you'd abandoned him, you never would have allowed him back in your house. And I can't tell you how much courage that took.
Carolyn choked back another sob.
Carolyn, be strong, dear. You're doing fine. He's going to get better, and he'll get back home before you know it.
Okay, Carolyn said, wiping her eyes. Just a little visit.
Yes,
Kincaid said back to her.
just a little one.
Okay.
You all right?
Yes, Carolyn lied, wiping at her eyes again. I'm okay.
All right, call me anytime, okay?
Yes, Carolyn said.
Good. I'll call the nurse station and let them know, all right?
Yes.
Have a good visit. Trey loves you. Help him get better, okay?
Carolyn didn't respond.
Bye, Carolyn.
The phone beeped as the connection ended. For a moment, Carolyn sat in the seat, the phone still held to her ear. She lowered the phone to her lap and stared at the hospital. Short visit, she thought to herself. Short visit. Wasn't that like abandoning him all over again? Just walking in and saying hello? Christ, she muttered aloud. She unfastened the seatbelt and stepped out into the humid winter air.